Hey, how's it going, guys? So in this video, we're going to be doing a review of the brand new Toro y Moi album, MAHAL. This is the brand new 7th solo studio album from producer, singer, songwriter, composer in a way, Toro y Moi, who first broke out into the scene in the late 2000s and early 2010s during the chill wave scene alongside other artists like Washed Out and Neon Indian, or some people may have first discovered Toro y Moi's music from his collaboration with hip-hop artists, especially Travis Scott on Rodeo. But thankfully it seems like here that unlike other artists like Washed Out, Toro y Moi, especially on this new album, proves that he is certainly not washed out. Because on this album, not only does he continue to show his ambition and his knack for utilizing a lot of different styles from psychedelia, neo-soul, and hip-hop, fusing them together to create nicely composed songs, and with his normal, charming, but subtle vocal delivery, but on this album, he goes a little bit further with that. He goes a bit more ambitious, making sure these tracks are as clean and as fresh, but also still sounding psychedelic, still sounding groovy with some very groovy, catchy, and captivating instrumentals, hooks, and even some deliveries. And even going a little bit here on the lyrical end, because Toro y Moi has not really been known as a lyrical genius or lyrical composer, but on this album, he goes a little bit further in with what he's talking about. But I think ultimately what wins me over so much with this album, unlike other projects he has made, is just how gorgeous a lot of these arrangements and how immaculate a lot of these instrumentals are layered that makes it sound both exuberant, fun, and also very mesmerizing at times too. Take, for example, one of the first lead singles, Postman, which is about as chill, groovy, but also as fun as a Toro y Moi single can get, with the very chunky and groovy bass line that gives versions of psychedelia and neo-soul, the drums, and some of the lyrics here as well, as the lyrics clearly point out Toro's disappointment of walking home from the post office with nothing but bills. And it may sound like a simple concept, but the way he pulls it off instrumentally, sonically, is fun. And not to mention those insane, raucous vocal deliveries. Yeah. It's just amazing. And lyrics like, she forgot to put it in the mailbox, what the fox? How can lyrics like that not put a smile on your face? Tell me, how? And then we also had the song The Loop, which, just like the title suggests, features loopy bass lines that makes up for a nicely structured pace for the guitar that slowly emerges more and more as the track goes on, which eventually ends with a sick guitar and drum solo at the end. Just very captivating song. And the lyrics here point out towards an encounter that Toro's had with the music label, the higher end of the music industry, and how they perceive another artist, and how the overall public perceives them compared to how he once saw them. So with solid singles like this, I was really looking forward to this album, and yeah, I'm pleased to say that this album not only lives up to the singles, but exceeded my expectations a little bit, resulting in one of his best projects to date. For starters, we have the opening track, The Medium, which features Unknown Mortal Orchestra, which has some nice keys layered by Toro y Moi, but it's really Ruben Nielsen from the band that steals the show with his loopy and twangy guitar riffs that just sound amazing. While there are no vocals on this track, I cannot deny how much of a great opening this leads to. Because yes, very little tracks actually sound like this, but that does not take away from the enjoyment of nearly all these tracks. Just on the follow-up track, Goes By Fast, which is driven by some groovy jazz R&B style drums, with the keys mixed in so nicely, they all converge together immaculately, and especially the saxophone and the windpipes at the end just sound absolutely stunning, absolutely gorgeous. And Toro y Moi's vocal performance, while he's never been the best vocalist out there, and I wouldn't say his vocals are absolutely amazing here, but they sound fun, they sound animated, they do not sound lazy, they don't sound half-toned, they actually sound filled with emotion, and it works here on this song. We have the song Magazine, which has a great electro neo-soul type instrumental with a great vocal performance from the feature, and a social commentary about the death of physical media and the impact that's having on the environment, as well as the impact that it has on people how they perceive the media and how they perceive everything else in life. We get the song Postman and the loop, which tie in quite nicely with each other. But then we also get the song Last Year, which some may think at first is kind of the ballad on this album. And in terms of the lyrics, it kind of is, as lyrically it's just diving in on some of the stuff that he went through last year, because we all know that 2020 and 2021 was a rough time for us with COVID. But Toro y Moi goes over how this time changed his way of viewing things, how it changed his conversations with certain people, just going into detail, making him one of the more introspective and personal songs on this record. But even instrumentally, this song just completely does it justice. The beautiful singular electronic piano and guitar chords with the subtle bass and percussion and mesmerizing vocal samples. And an interesting outro that sounds like the record is being played with, as in, spinned DJ Quick style. The song overall really kind of reminds me of something that Bell and Sebastian would do, but mixed with a bit of Hiatus Coyote, especially from their last album. We have the song Mississippi, which is the shortest track on here, clocking in at just under 2 minutes. It features a nicely arranged blues-inspired guitar chords, layered with the electronic elements, which is put together very nicely, but I think the track is just a little bit too short to make it a standout moment, and the drums here aren't really mixed very well. Even though the clarity of them sounds fine, the mixing of them just doesn't. Speaking of the song Clarity, which is the next song right after, easily a top 3 song on this album, it opens sounding like a more harder-hitting guitar-driven opus, but with some more zany keys and subtle but compact drums that sound stunningly beautiful and psychedelic when they're all layered together. Great vocal performance on Toro as well, and we also get a solid cymbal and bass solo with some chill wave passages at the very end, which just sounds absolutely amazing. We had the song Deja Vu, which is yet another highlight on this album, along with many other tracks, to be honest, which is a great blend between noise rock and R&B, as we get some killer dense bass lines with some amazing droning noise rock style guitar and some memorable lyrics from Toro as well. We have the song Millennium, which features some gratifying loopy funk rock inspired guitar chords converging perfectly with the bass with some extra layers. We also get a nice synth passage in the background, which we don't hear the synth a real lot on this album, unlike we do with other Toro y Moi albums, which I'm perfectly fine with, as it makes way for some more delicate, authentic, neo-soul inspired instrumentals. But the few times we do hear it here, it works nicely, and it works as a nice extra layer for this psychedelic monster here, which the same also can be said on a lot of these tracks with how well they are layered together, and this song is no exception. And we also on this song get some surprising jingle bells in the middle, which sound fun, as well as a techno-driven solo towards the end. And like I said about how nicely arranged these tracks are and layered to give it a psychedelic feel, obviously I cannot talk about that without talking about the closing track. And that song comes in the form of Days in Love, which sonically really reminisces that of lonerism type Tame Impala mixed with Midnight Ventures era Beck, and it comes together so nicely because I would say both these albums are kind of peak for both these artists, and Toro does this very well. And that's thanks to the psychedelic funk rock inspired guitar and bass with the plucky jazz style keys, the cathartic but controlled drums, and the animated vocal performance, leading to an amazing and hard-hitting closing that also feels like the light at the end of a beautiful, colorful, and mesmerizing spiritual journey guided by the tour bus depicted in the cover, which drives the album along with the short and fun little interludes it provides within the songs. Because Toro y Moi sonically here is also bringing out some of his Filipino roots and is really doing that with the cover of this album, as it depicts the tour bus used in the Philippines, and that kind of provides a nice imagery for the album mixed with the interludes here that gives it even more personality. So this album is chock full of highlights, chock full of amazing songs that are both fun, mesmerizing, and memorable as well, and some of his best songs, honestly. There are a couple of tracks here, a couple of slightly weak spots here, like the song Mississippi that I mentioned before. We also have the song Foreplay, which has a cool wavy opening, and most of what the layers are I like, except for the weird crunchy pressing percussion that doesn't really sound too good. But aside from that, the layers do sound good, but it's just the way they're condensed together. And for the most part, the layering on this album is fantastic, and I think the instrumentals come together so nicely, but this is one of the few where I don't think it does. And overall, I think this is probably the only song on the album that I would consider to be somewhat forgettable. And then we have the song Way Too Hot, which is probably my least favorite track on here. While the guitars hit hard and they sound really good, the biggest problem with this is that at parts, it sounds a little bit too loud to the point where it's overdubbing the nice piano in the background, as well as the bass lines as well. I mean, at some points, the bass meshes nicely with the guitar, but at other points, the guitar just sounds a little bit too ear-piercing for me. But these are just very small gripes I have with this album. Overall, I am super impressed with this new Toro y Moi album. I think the track listing is great. I think there's so many great songs on here, some of his best songs to date. I think it's got some of his best songwriting as well, and kind of understated as well. Overall, I feel like this entire album is understated and underrated, as I've seen some people rule this album out as like a Twin Shadow or Beck ripoff. And while I'm definitely hearing some influences of Beck and Tame Impala, as well as some Hiatus Coyote in this album, and some Washed Out, I think he is doing these styles justice and putting together so many genres, paying tribute to a lot of genres into some very nice, soft, harmless, fun bangers and slow burners too. So yeah, I'm in love with this album. It's going to go down as one of my favorite albums this year, and that's why I'm giving it a light 9 out of 10. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, let me know a like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you thought of this album. What's your favorite tracks? What's your least favorite tracks? Let me know. But until then, guys, stay tuned for the next review. And until then, this is Rhino Rates Music signing out. Have a good day. Bye-bye.